Episode 46, Questions Left Unanswered. Welcome to the Hidden and Distorted History of the Church series, where we will be looking at the historical aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. In this series, I will try and inform those unaware of the true facts of Mormon history. Recap. Last week, we exposed the excommunication of Samson Avard, a man betrayed, used, and discarded like yesterday's trash. We unraveled yet another version of Joseph Smith's so-called first vision, a tale conveniently hidden from church members to keep the narrative tightly controlled. Matilda Spalding dropped a bombshell in the Spalding debate, reigniting accusations of blatant plagiarism. And finally, we left off with Joseph and church leaders making their dramatic escape after being transported to Boone County under cut. This week, we dive headfirst into the audacious claims surrounding Joseph Smith III's supposed succession as church leader. Folk magic makes another bizarre appearance as Smith hands a father a handkerchief, claiming it will miraculously heal his sick child. But the scheming doesn't stop there. Joseph is back at it, selling plots of land to unsuspecting British converts. And wait until you hear who he bought that land from. This episode is packed with deceit and manipulation you won't want to miss. Part 1, Joseph's Successor. On April 22, 1839, Joseph Smith Jr. reportedly made a statement, recorded by his mother, Lucy Mack Smith, that many interpret as designating his son Joseph Smith III as his eventual successor. This assertion has since fueled fiery debates over early Mormon leadership succession and the fractures that ripped the movement apart after Smith's 1844 assassination. Joseph Smith Jr. fathered several children with Emma Hale Smith, but most died young. Joseph Smith III, born in 1832, was one of the few to survive into adulthood. According to historical accounts, Joseph Smith Jr. allegedly hinted at a divine calling for his son, privately suggesting that young Joseph would one day assume leadership of the church. However, the glaring absence of a public or formal declaration left these claims ripe for manipulation and controversy. Joseph Smith III later claimed his father had designated him as the rightful heir, a claim that conveniently bolstered his leadership within the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, RLDS, now Community of Christ. This narrative became a cornerstone of his legitimacy, despite the lack of concrete evidence that his father ever solidified such plans. The chaos surrounding this supposed succession underscores a fatal flaw in Joseph Smith Jr.'s leadership, his failure to establish a clear process for succession. As prophet, seer, and revelator, Smith wielded absolute power over the fledgling church, holding every major leadership role. Yet his refusal, or inability, to name a successor set the stage for a vicious power struggle following his death. William Marks, a high-ranking Nauvoo church leader and ally of Emma Smith, further stoked the flames by claiming Joseph Smith Jr. had hinted at Joseph III's future role. Marks would later play a pivotal role in urging the younger Smith to step into leadership. However, Marks's claims remain as unverifiable as Joseph Smith III's, steeped more in convenience than in documented truth. Modern historians, including RLDS scholar Richard P. Howard, have scrutinized these claims, often emphasizing their dubious origins and sociological implications. Despite RLDS efforts to cement Joseph III's leadership narrative, the lack of explicit contemporary documentation leaves his supposed divine calling as little more than a self-serving myth crafted to consolidate power in a fractured movement. The truth is stark. Joseph Smith Jr.'s silence on succession was a ticking time bomb, and its explosion reshaped the course of Mormon history. Part 2, The Magic Hanky. In the spring of 1839, Joseph Smith found himself performing yet another act of what can only be described as folk magic. According to Wilford Woodruff's account in Leaves from My Journal, written decades later, Smith gave a handkerchief to a distraught father, claiming it had the power to heal the man's sick child. Smith instructed the father to place the handkerchief on the child, promising that faith would work the miracle. This wasn't the first time Smith used objects to demonstrate his supposed divine power. From seer stones to swords, Smith's use of physical items carried deep symbolism, helping to build the illusion of a prophet connected to God's mysteries. But let's not ignore what's really happening here. Smith's performance wasn't just about faith, it was about control. Moments like this reinforced his role as the ultimate authority, a man who not only spoke for God but could channel divine power into the mundane. To his believers, this was proof of his prophetic mantle. To his critics, it was another stunt designed to exploit the desperate. And what of the child? Woodruff's account conveniently omits the outcome. Did the child recover? Did the father leave believing in Smith's power? Or was this another case of misplaced faith in a man who used every opportunity to solidify his influence? This handkerchief may seem trivial, but it highlights the recurring pattern of manipulation that defined Smith's leadership. His actions weren't isolated incidents. They were calculated steps in a larger narrative, one designed to keep his followers obedient and in awe of his supposed divine connection. One handkerchief, one child, one more act in the endless theater of Joseph Smith. Part 3. The British are coming. On June 6, 1839, the first wave of British converts arrived in Nauvoo, drawn by promises of cheap land and a new beginning. These immigrants were eager to join what they believed was Zion on earth, a place where they could build a future alongside their fellow saints. What they didn't know was that Nauvoo's cheap land came at a hidden cost. Joseph Smith and church leaders were actively promoting these plots, not just as a community-building effort, but as a convenient way to fund their growing ambitions. The British saints brought with them more than faith. They brought money. Land sales were a key strategy for financing the church's relocation and expanding its influence. Smith knew that selling the dream of Zion to these newcomers would bring both loyalty and resources. The promise of cheap land wasn't just a selling point, it was bait. For the converts who spent their savings to settle in Nauvoo, this was a leap of faith. For Joseph Smith, it was a calculated move in his ongoing effort to secure power and wealth under the guise of building God's kingdom. While these new arrivals worked to build a life in their promised land, Smith and his inner circle reaped the benefits, ensuring that Nauvoo's foundation was laid with both faith and financial exploitation. Though the question is, where was Smith to get this land? Part 4. Isaac Gallen, the hidden figure. On July 3, 1839, Isaac Gallen, a man whose name would become entwined with the early days of Nauvoo, was baptized and ordained an elder by Joseph Smith himself. Gallen's baptism marked more than just a personal conversion. It was a strategic move by Smith to solidify a relationship that had already proven invaluable. Gallen wasn't just any convert. He was a land speculator and businessman whose properties along the Mississippi River became the foundation of the Mormon settlement in Nauvoo. Smith had struck a deal with Gallen earlier that year, acquiring significant tracts of land under terms that allowed the financially strapped church to establish its new gathering place. By baptizing and ordaining Gallen, Smith wasn't just welcoming a new member into the fold, he was cementing an alliance. Gallen's influence, both in property and local connections, made him a valuable asset in Smith's vision for Nauvoo as the new Zion. But Gallen's reputation was far from spotless. He had a history of land speculation and questionable dealings, leading some to question the wisdom or motives behind his rapid rise in the church. Was his ordination a reward for his assistance, or a calculated move to secure his loyalty in the face of growing challenges? Whatever the reason, Gallen's baptism and ordination on that July day symbolized the intersection of faith and practicality that defined much of Joseph Smith's leadership. In Nauvoo, every alliance had a purpose, and every act carried a deeper intent. Part 5. Gallen plays more of a role. On July 24, 1839, Joseph Smith received a letter from Isaac Gallen, but this wasn't just a letter about land deals or local politics. It was a communication brimming with references to Unanswered Swedenborg, an internationally recognized mystic and theologian. Swedenborg's writings were already famous by this time, influencing religious thought across Europe and into Eastern America. His ideas about the afterlife, heaven, and the nature of God were revolutionary, even controversial. For someone like Joseph Smith, Swedenborg's mysticism wasn't just intriguing, it was a treasure trove of concepts ready to be repurposed. Swedenborg taught of multiple heavens, each corresponding to different levels of righteousness, a striking parallel to Smith's later revelations about the 3 degrees of glory in Mormon theology. Swedenborg's descriptions of the spiritual world as a place of order and progression mirrored ideas that Smith would introduce to his followers in the years ahead. Gallen's letter wasn't just a passing mention. It repeatedly emphasized Swedenborg's teachings, showing how deeply Gallen admired the mystic's work. Smith, ever the opportunist, appeared to absorb Swedenborg's ideas into his expanding theological framework. Though was Gallen the inspiration behind Smith adopting the teachings, the influence of Swedenborg on Mormonism cannot be overstated. His doctrines provided a foundation for some of the most distinctive aspects of Smith's theology. Concepts of eternal marriage, spirit communication, and celestial progression all echo Swedenborgian thought, rebranded under the banner of Smith's revelations. This letter from Gallen wasn't just correspondence. It was a bridge between the mysticism of Europe and the burgeoning theology of Mormonism. Swedenborg's ideas, filtered through Smith's lens, would become cornerstones of LDS doctrine, reshaping the beliefs of generations to come. Part 6, Money and Power. In August 1839, Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith, and Sidney Rigdon made a monumental move for the future of Nauvoo, agreeing to what became known as the Hotchkiss Purchase. This deal secured a 500-acre tract of land strategically located near the main steamboat landing, prime real estate for the burgeoning Mormon settlement. The terms of the agreement: a staggering $53,500 plus interest, a massive sum for the struggling church. This wasn't an outright purchase, but a contract, a gamble that assumed the fledgling community could generate enough income to pay off the debt. Why this land? The proximity to the steamboat landing wasn't just convenient, it was critical. This location ensured that Nauvoo could become a hub for trade and immigration, a gateway for the steady stream of converts arriving from across the United States and Europe. But let's not sugarcoat this. The Hotchkiss Purchase wasn't purely an inspired move to build Zion. It was also a calculated business decision. Smith and his associates knew that controlling land meant controlling wealth. They planned to resell plots to the incoming converts, turning faith into revenue. Yet the deal came with significant risks. The church was already strapped for cash, and this agreement added a heavy financial burden. The payments loomed over Nauvoo's early years, creating tension and contributing to the church's growing debts. The Hotchkiss Purchase wasn't just a land deal. It was a gamble that tied the success of Nauvoo to Joseph Smith's ability to manage both the spiritual and financial demands of his growing kingdom. And while Smith may have preached of building Zion, the Hotchkiss Purchase reminds us that his vision for Nauvoo was as much about economic control as it was about spiritual salvation. Part 7, The Scam continues. By October 20th, 1839, the Nauvoo High Council made a significant financial declaration. The average price of lots in the city would be set at $500, with none priced lower than $200 and none higher than $800. This decision, recorded in the History of the Church, 417, marked a critical escalation in Joseph Smith's speculative land dealings. What was the rationale? Smith and his leadership positioned Nauvoo as the new Zion, a promised land where faithful converts could build their lives. But this wasn't just a spiritual endeavor, it was also a bold financial play. The pricing scheme reflected an attempt to capitalize on the influx of settlers, particularly those arriving from overseas, who were eager to buy into the dream of Zion. Yet, the cracks in Smith's financial empire were already showing. The rapid escalation of land speculation wasn't sustainable, and Nauvoo quickly became a powder keg of economic instability. Converts, many of whom had sacrificed everything to join the church, faced exorbitant costs for land. For some, the promise of Zion turned into crushing debt. This was far from an isolated event. Smith's land dealings would become a recurring theme, with financial failures and mounting debts haunting the church in the years to come. October 20th, 1839, may have formalized the pricing of lots, but it also set the stage for future crises, including the August 15, 1841, land tax struggles and the disastrous March 5, 1842, bankruptcy proceedings. While Nauvoo's promise shimmered as a beacon to converts, behind the scenes, Smith's financial schemes were unraveling. The land speculation that promised to fund Zion's growth became a trap, one that would plague the Mormon movement for years to come. For Joseph Smith, the Nauvoo dream was never just about faith. It was a high-stakes gamble, one that would leave many of his followers footing the bill for his financial ambition. Conclusion: Joseph Smith's failure to establish a clear succession plan created a leadership vacuum that would tear the Mormon movement apart after his death. His manipulation of religious symbolism, financial schemes, and land dealings, particularly in Nauvoo, illustrated his efforts to maintain control, often at the expense of his followers. These tactics, from the promise of cheap land to dubious spiritual claims, reveal a pattern of using faith as a tool for personal gain. Ultimately, Smith's complex legacy is marked by his blend of prophetic ambition and financial instability, leaving his followers caught between devotion and exploitation. Please watch for future videos, and thank you so kindly for watching. This is the Ex-Mormon Informant signing off for the day.